Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Okay. Hi. Let's go. Let's learn preemptive like. Original link to the video, top of the description below. Right below that, link to the Discord. Would love to have you. Click on it, send you right over there. My name's Connor, if you're new. Did I say that? And I like to learn. Napoleonic Wars, Deadliest Day of the Napoleonic Wars, Battle of Borodino. Let's do it. So I have learned a good amount about the Napoleonic Wars, but just not enough. A good amount. I guess that's relative. I haven't done enough repetition to the point where I can be like, oh, like you give me a battle, and I'm like, oh, that happens here, and this is what happened there. So I still have some learning to do. Let's do it. Phones away. Toss it. Let's do it.
Nikolai Raevsky can barely see through his spyglass. From his position on the parapet of an earthen redoubt, the Russian struggles to pierce the thick smoke of his own...
Just let me start over, please. Okay.
Nikolai Raevsky can barely see through his spyglass. From his position on the parapet of an earthen redoubt, the Russian struggles to pierce the thick smoke of his own cannons. Surely the French have been driven off by his artillery, and a second attack is out of the question. A staff officer interrupts his rumination with orders to shift position. Raevsky looks the dispatch over, questions of logistics and maneuver coming to mind. In the thick smoke of the cannons, a French infantryman struggles to breathe as he ascends the earthen side of the redoubt. He checks his bayonet to make sure it is locked securely in place. And not 10 feet away, through the thick, noxious smoke, he can hear Russian voices. Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the armchair historian. In the early 19th century, the entirety of Europe seemed poised to bend the collective knee to a single Corsican, Napoleon Bonaparte. The Grande Armée enforced Bonaparte's will on most of mainland Europe, installing quislings and lesser Bonapartes and isolating the ever-defiant British, leaving the French with one true rival for supremacy on the continent, Tsarist Russia. Resolved to ensure his was the only power in Europe, Napoleon turned his mighty force east, invading Russia and signing the death warrant of his empire. In this video, we will look at the climactic Battle of Borodino, the last triumph before the French eagle came crashing to earth and was savaged beneath the claws of the Russian bear. During the Napoleonic Wars, all nations maintained extensive spy networks both at home and abroad. France, in particular, benefited from the services of men like Joseph Fouché, who conducted numerous missions to infiltrate foreign governments, assassinate prominent officials, and sow disinformation among the emperor's many enemies.
I'm calling it.
Luckily for us, these...
I knew it. I knew it. I have a sixth sense when it comes to ads. I'm just like, ooh, he's transitioning. I guess it's not that impressive.
Sponsor of today's video, NordVPN, offers everyone the tools they need.
Please, if this motivates you to get NordVPN, please use the /historyVPN to help them out. They well deserved.
To keep their military secrets and diplomatic messages safe from prying eyes. In addition to offering threat protection against malware, generating secure passwords via NordPass, and providing encrypted cloud storage via NordLocker, NordVPN lets you access region-locked content from around the world. Even our team can benefit from NordVPN, letting us view historical movies, documentaries, and assets normally blocked outside their home countries. So head over to the description box and start protecting your data today, with 4 months for free off of a 2-year plan and a 30-day money-back guarantee when you start using NordVPN via our dedicated link, nordvpn.com/historyvpn.
One sec, guys. I'm gonna fix the lighting. Okay, make my room darker and it's lighter on camera. That makes a lot of sense. All right.
Napoleon led an army of 680,000 men, while the Russians called up 623,000 conscripts. Napoleon's force was a varied one, with units of cavalry and over 1,200 artillery pieces. A significant portion of Napoleon's numbers came from allied or vassal states, with half of his cavalry units and a third of his infantry coming from the German state of Württemberg, while the emperor himself led French and Italian troops. The French had the second advantage of a highly competent officer corps, including the legendary Marshal Michel Ney of the French cavalry. Russia was the second party in this duel of juggernauts, with the core of the Tsarist army made up of peasant conscripts charged with serving for a full 25 years. The average conscript was a man subjected to harsh conditions and harsher discipline, but he bore the travels with a sense of national pride and purpose. Of particular renown were the Cossacks, steppe raiders used as cavalry by the Russians. The Cossacks were given near total freedom of movement, operating as a force unto themselves to sow terror in the enemy ranks with their maneuvers. The ebbs and flows of the campaign in Russia deserve their own video, but suffice to say that the armies that would meet at Borodino were shadows of their previously mentioned selves. 2 months of running battles, retreats, and skirmishes had taken their toll on both sides. The French had been reduced to half of their original force. When battle was finally met, 133,000 beaten and burned out men faced off against 125,000 Russians. Preparations for battle began on September 3rd,
In a really like kind of sick sort of way, or I want to see like what it's like what the soldier looks like in battles like this, or battles like Stalingrad, or like battles where they are well into the war and people who are alive are either new or have seen a lot of stuff. And so I just want to see like the look on their face, you know, like a soldier there. It must be like almost like a feral, maybe not. Do you know what I mean?
Preparations for battle began on September 3rd, 1812, when the Russian commander Mikhail Kutuzov selected Borodino as the place where he would make his stand. Kutuzov was a fascinating character, a polyglot placed in overall command to balance out the twin generals of the Russian defense, the calculating Scottish import Michael Andreas Barclay and the passionate Pyotr Bagration. Kutuzov chose his field well. The village of Borodino was 70 miles or roughly 112 kilometers from Moscow, sitting along rivers and marshes nestled between the twin roads to the city. The Russians laid out a defense in 2 wings. The right wing being situated along the Kolocha stream and backed up by 26 field guns, but cut off from the village of Borodino by the stream. The left wing was stretched out and vulnerable, arrayed along a line of marshes and the Semikovska stream, along with the namesake village of wooden houses with no defensive value.
I just need my water.
On September 5th, Napoleon's forces come across the Russian positions. The French quickly array themselves to strike on the weaker Russian left, focusing their initial efforts on a dug-in position called the Shevardino Redoubt. The cavalry opened the battle, engaging with the Russian horse, while the French quickly array themselves to strike on the weaker Russian left, focusing their initial efforts on a dug-in position called the Shevardino Redoubt. The cavalry open the battle, engaging with the Russian horse, while French infantry march on the redoubt itself. The French cavalry send their counterparts to rout, as Napoleon's infantry engage in a point-blank musket duel with the Russians, who hold the redoubt by their fingernails as their flanks disintegrate. In a darkly comic twist, the commander of the Russian artillery had observed the opening moments of the battle and rode off to report to Bagration how well the position was holding. He now comes back to find the position crumbling, his guns perilously close to capture as Russian infantry
It would
abandoned
have been funny if he did like, your nexus is under attack or something like
the redoubt.
Sorry, okay. Serious.
His guns perilously close to capture as Russian infantry abandoned the redoubt. Nightfall brings no respite, as the French continue their tug of war until the stroke of midnight, when orders from Kutuzov come to retreat. The French take the area, and the Russian commanders bicker in their tents. This initial engagement sees 18,000 Russians pitted against 25,000 French in a horrendous miscalculation. For now, an uneasy peace settles over Borodino. The Russians have no interest in sallying forth, while Napoleon feverishly finalizes his strategy, anticipating the arrival of his reserve artillery. The French emperor is presented with plans for a grand flanking maneuver, which he rejects outright, opting for a frontal assault. Kutuzov, meanwhile, opts for a vague defensive plan, holding out for as long as possible and refusing to commit his reserves until the last possible moment. The French construct bridges over the Kolocha above Borodino and array their guns to bombard the village.
He has such a great setup.
As the morning of the 7th dawns, Napoleon's officers read their men a proclamation from the emperor. Soldiers, here is the battle you have so much desired. The victory now depends on you. We have need of it. Victory will give us abundant supplies, good winter quarters, and a prompt return to our native land. Fight as you did at Austerlitz, Friedland, Vitebsk.
Okay, so Borodino is the battle. This will just help me remember it if I say it out loud. It's the battle before, like, the famous, march back through Russia where... So it's the final battle before, like, the total collapse, okay, right?
And Smolensk, and posterity at Austerlitz, Friedland, Vitebsk, and Smolensk, and posterity will remember with pride your conduct on this great day. May it be said of each of us, he fought in that great battle under the walls of Moscow. The French commit 85,000 men to Napoleon's grand assault, who will throw themselves at the Russians along a 1.5-mile, or roughly 2-kilometer front, stretching from a redoubt in the north, commanded by Russian General Nikolai Raevsky, to fetid marshland in the south. In the far south, a Polish contingent marches up the old Smolensk road to outflank the Russians. At 6 a.m. precisely, the French guns open up, hammering on the Russian soldiers in Borodino. Barclay orders his men to abandon the village and burn the Borodino bridge, but the Russians are already engaged. In 15 minutes, they lose over half their numbers, but succeed in burning the bridge as ordered. The French plant artillery on their side of the river in response, bringing the Russians' own cannon and Raevsky's redoubt quite literally under the gun. A half hour later, Russians under Bagration face a French assault on their earthworks, or flèches, with Napoleon's forces marching through devastating canister shot and ambushes by Russian Jaegers as they make for the earthworks. The French are bloodied by their advance and driven off by the Russians, who hold their fortifications. At the same time, the Poles on the Smolensk road assault the village of Utitsa, which includes a hill with a commanding view of the battlefield. The Russians fight hard to hold the high ground, burning Utitsa itself in their bid to deny Napoleon. As the Poles continue to push on the village, French forces enter the nearby woods to clear the troublesome Jaegers. Both sides send reinforcements into the fights, and the struggle for Bagration's flèches is particularly fierce. A renewed French assault outpaces Russian reinforcements, and Bagration himself is injured. Though he successfully withdraws and survives, a rumor burns through his lines that the passionate commander is dead, critically wounding Russian morale. Bagration is carried to a medical tent where he begins issuing orders. At 9:30 a.m., Raevski's redoubt sees its first attack. The French advance slowly on the fortification, unaware that many of its defenders have been siphoned off to other areas. The redoubt is a cramped affair, too small to hold any infantry, so the crews of their 18 guns inside are expected to both serve their pieces and defend the parapet. The Russian infantry mass outside the walls, while the cavalry stand on to the left rear of the fortification, and are severely bloodied by the French opening bombardment. Raevski observes the battle from the parapet, and sees an initial French assault repulsed by his infantry, but the general's celebration is short-lived, as the smoke from his weapons create an ad hoc smokescreen that the French use to mask a second push. Raevski, ignorant of the French advance, receives word that Bagration has been injured and has requested he change positions. As he takes in this new order, Raevski is suddenly forced to retreat before a wave of Napoleon's grenadiers, bayonets fixed and murder in their eyes. The French sweep Raevski and his men from the redoubt. While the fighting rages at Bagration's flèches and Raevski's redoubt, Napoleon commands an assault on the Russians' center-left with a majority cavalry force. The French riders blunder into the Russian...
I'd really like to learn the background and the reason for the different styles of helmets, you know? Not just Napoleonic Wars, but I guess starting here.
Line or left with a majority cavalry force. The French riders blunder into the Russian lines and are at risk of being swamped by their Tsarist counterparts until a Lancer unit makes a spectacular counter, sending the Russian horse scattering. The Russian infantry is made of sterner stuff, and forms squares that catch the seemingly ascendant French cavalry in a withering crossfire. The Russians trip up the French so badly that their infantry are able to launch a bayonet charge against cavalry.
Let me just say it so I can get out of my head. And okay, I think was it Peter the Great? I forget who said it, but kind of just like encapsulates the Russian kind of way of fighting, not way of, I might be getting this wrong, I'm paraphrasing, and I hope I'm, but he said something like, after Narva, or no, not Narva, after a battle, he said, so they won today, they might win tomorrow, but eventually we will learn how to beat them. So like, they beat us today, they might beat us tomorrow, but eventually we will learn how to beat them. And I think that, and I've said this a few times, with the geographies of certain nations kind of dictating their military, their military prowess, their strategy. Strategy of, they have such a large area and a lot of people that they can afford to kind of, okay, step back, we lost, and until the other side just like, okay, the other side can like win, but eventually it's so outstretched and they're in an area where the seasons are going to change and devastate you. I know, like, I believe I heard a fact, let me know if I'm wrong, that most Napoleonic soldiers, or it might have been soldiers in World War II, like died in the summertime rather than the winter because of disease being more prevalent in the summer. But just how, like, geography kind of, allows a military to work a certain way. I said that terribly. I hope I made some sense.
Napoleon fails to commit his reserves into the fight, continually insisting he lacks sufficient intelligence to do so. Though it is reported the emperor is exhausted and utterly sleep-deprived, which may explain his bizarre decision here. Nevertheless, the Russians stand like stone in the face of Napoleon's attack and hold their positions for a full 2 hours. As the battle rages, Cossacks suddenly appear in a flanking maneuver on the French line. Barclay rides to assume command from Bagration and is stopped by the spectacle of the fight over Raevski's redoubt. Smoke and flame prevent the Scot from seeing anything, and he sends a subordinate to investigate, who finds the defense in collapse and the redoubt in French hands. But the French are counterattacked from 4 directions simultaneously, and in 10 minutes their gains are entirely reversed, the Cossacks' presence deterring a French counterattack and buying the Russians critical time. It is afternoon in Borodino, Raevski's redoubt has been recaptured, the Poles at Utitsa are finally and definitively repulsed, and the fortunes of battle seem to be shifting against Napoleon. It is now critical that the French retake Raevski's redoubt, and after hours' delay, thanks to the Cossacks and Russian artillery, Napoleon's men march once more. Barclay demurs on reinforcing the position, leaving whoever is defending the redoubt to their own devices. The redoubt is assaulted at 3 p.m., led by the French horse, who fly in to engage the defenders hand-to-hand with the French infantry close behind. The Russian infantry draw themselves up on...
That's interesting. So as artillery, you really have to make sure that you fire your guns in a frequency that makes sense with your amount of ammo, or makes sense with the amount of men you have ready, because the other side is going to be thinking in certain, like, intelligent ways to, like, wait for the artillery to seem like it's dying down, and maybe they like fired too many too quick or something.
Elevated ground behind the redoubt, with conspicuous gaps in their line. The French cavalry leave the redoubt to engage the Russians, riding straight through the gaps in their own line, where they are set on by Barclay's cavalry in a bitter melee. On the whole, the Russians have steadily been pushed back despite winning tactical victories, and the defenders of Utitsa find themselves in a salient, which they pull out of in the late afternoon, leaving the village to finally fall to the Poles. Barclay sends a staff officer to Kutuzov to ask for reinforcements, and a chance to salvage something from this back and forth. Barclay's rider finds Kutuzov far off from the fighting, surrounded by an entourage of young and thoroughly debauched officers. Kutuzov is indignant at a report of Napoleon's progress, declaring that the messenger was clearly a drunkard who had not seen the real battle. We have victoriously repulsed the French attackers.
Why did I feel like that horse was like eyeing me, like he wants to take me out for dinner or something?
Seen the real battle. We have victoriously repulsed the French attackers along the whole length of our front, and tomorrow I shall place myself at the head of the army and drive the enemy without more ado from the holy soil of Russia. Despite his outright delusional statements, Kutuzov orders Barclay to withdraw to better ground, convinced that at a minimum, the French have been desperately bloodied and he can marshal a grand counterattack the next day. Barclay knows this to be a folly and orders a general retreat. It is now 6 p.m. in Borodino, and the battle is finally over. Kutuzov declared himself the winner of a great victory and wrote a letter to Tsar Alexander informing him. The vainglorious general received 100,000 rubles and promotion to field marshal, all at the cost of 38 to 40.
Sorry, this is the kind of macabre, but I'd imagine after a huge battle, the fly population probably explodes because of all of the, I mean, depending on, I thought of that, I don't know.
Informing him the vain victory and wrote a letter to Tsar Alexander informing him. The vainglorious general received 100,000 rubles and promotion to field marshal, all at the cost of 38 to 44,000 dead and wounded, which equates to roughly 34% of the troops committed to the fight. Kutuzov was not far off with his uninformed estimation of the French condition. Napoleon's forces were bloodied, with 30,000 killed and wounded, but Borodino allowed Napoleon to march on and occupy Moscow, a feat which logically should have led to the Tsar's surrender, a surrender which did not come. The Grande Armée emerged from Borodino a husk, exhausted and wretched, so they wintered in Moscow before their disastrous withdrawal back to warmer climes, marching not from the scene of a great victory, but to the beginning of Napoleon's end.
That's so genius, because that's the thing that Russia has. It's like, okay, great, awesome. You captured Russia, you captured Moscow. Good. Why is it dark again on my screen? Good. So you gonna surrender? No, because you're in the middle of nowhere, so far from home, and in a very hospitable place, and I can just run and wait you out. And just... right? Awesome video as always. Really cool video. Russia just does not give up. And I think their geography has allowed them to do so. Maybe there's a sort of mental aspect too, I don't know. But awesome video. Armchair Historian, phenomenal channel, fantastic. Hope you guys are doing well. If you can answer any of my questions, that'd be great. I tried to think if I had any. And yeah, I hope you're doing well. If not, chin up. You'll be good soon. Don't worry, all right? Love you guys. See you next time. Bye.